Way, 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 way. Wake up with wake.
Dynamo, or should I say, Stephen?
We're friends, you can call me like.
Stephen, in researching your story, I've been surprised, inspired, shocked, but in many ways, it's given me the context I think that was missing as to how a man like you committed their life to magic. For people that don't know your story, your earliest years, and the context back there in Bradford in 1982, what is the context that we need to understand in order to understand you?
I think, ultimately, it's the ethos that sometimes magic is found in the most unlikely places. And I was a kid in a council estate with no hopes, not much family around me, no real direction. And if anything, I should never have amounted to anything. So, for me, just trying to not be confined by my environment, by my circumstances, is the magic I've been searching for all my life. And hopefully I can use the magic I've now found to inspire others who might find themselves trapped in a similar position.
Bradford, 1982, you said you didn't have a lot of family around you. What family did you have and not have around you?
I mean, I'd just born, so, I can't remember exactly everything from literally 82, but from, say, 86, I believe that was when my dad went to jail, so he wasn't around any longer. My mum was there, but she had me really young, but she would have been about 20 then. So a young mum losing her partner who would have been raising me with her.
So your mum had you at 16?
Yeah, she was pregnant at 16.
Okay. Was there racial issues in your childhood? Because I think are you biracial?
Yeah. My father's Patan, my mum's English.
Okay, Patan, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, it's a tribe. There's parts of it in Afghanistan, parts of it in Pakistan, parts of it's kind of scattered around the world.
You must have been, 4 years old when he went to prison?
Yeah.
Did you understand what that meant?
No, not all. I remember him going out and then just never coming back. It wasn't until I was a lot older that I kind of understood that he'd gone away and why he'd gone away, and and it's weird. Like, I was young enough that not having him around became a normal thing, like not having a father. I was on a council estate where other people didn't have fathers around, or mothers, or, with a lot of broken families. So for me, it became just a normal way of life. I think if I'd have been a bit older and had more chance to understand more and miss more, then it would have maybe been harder.
Did you resent him at that age when you started to realise what you had lost in a father?
I think, if I'm honest, I resented him more as an adult. As I got older, I resented him more when I first met him properly, after, when he came to Revolution wine bar in Bradford, and this was when I was 19 years old, and I'd started to make a little bit of a name for myself with my magic. Back then, I think I would apply for a Prince's Trust startup loan and all that sort of stuff. I was basically, starting to go somewhere that was positive in my life. And I got called by the manager of Evolution saying, "Oh, there's a gentleman that says he's your dad. Has come to see you." He said, "Oh, I'm Dynamo's dad." And I'm like, that's weird, because I don't really feel like I've got a dad. So I'm like, okay, this is strange. And then I said, "Oh, well, just tell him I'm busy right now, but if he wants to come in a couple of days' time when I'm not working," because I was getting ready to do a set at the bar. I perform magic, basically, in the Revolution bar. And he came back a few days later, And I mean, he kind of looked like me, so I kind of knew it was true. You know, I asked my mum about it, and she explained, you know, but yeah, he's not in jail anymore, and he's been out and he's been asking about you. I think he tried to call my mum a few times. He called my nana's phone as well, and they'd always just kind of, you know, they saw that I was getting on with my life and I'd got used to a life without him in it, so they felt that it was best for me to not have him in my life. And then when I met him, it was so strange, because he basically said that you've got a, you know, I see you've got a little crew around you. Do any of your friends want to help shift some stuff for me? And when I say stuff, I'm not talking about legal stuff. And at that point, I was just like, wow, you know, he's clearly not been reformed, and I don't feel like he's the sort of person I need in my life right now, because I've spent a lot of my life trying to avoid this type of environment.
How long had it been since you'd seen him at that moment?
This was when I was 19, so from, say, 4 years old.
So you hadn't seen him for like 15 years, and the first time he sees you, he asks you to help him shift some drugs.
Yeah, not just drugs, but yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what else it could be if it's not true. Okay.
He was into stuff, lots of stuff, you know, and you know, that's the life some people choose. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know him enough to be able to say whether he was a good man or a bad man, because, you know, end of the day, just because you do that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily ultimately make you a bad person. It can be the circumstances that lead you into that world.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time in my life, you know, I'd been getting some incredible support from MAPA Youth Centre in Bradford. I basically was surrounded by, for the first time in my life, positive role models from, you know, positive male role models. And part of me hoped that when I saw my dad, that he could be one of those. But I think I was too far gone in the other direction, and he was going in a different direction, and it just wasn't meant to be. And, you know, like I think then I just became indifferent. I just thought, well, you know what, I've gone this far without a father, so I don't really need one now.
Resentment.
Mm.
Was that because you were still holding out hope that he was someone else, or where did the resentment come from in that moment? You said that's when you resented him the most.
Because I think he had in front of him an opportunity to connect with me, and he saw a different opportunity in that moment.
He cared more about using you as a vehicle to sell drugs.
Yeah.
Are you still holding on to pain?
Yeah, 100%. There's going to be parts of that that will never be closed off, because sadly he's not alive anymore.
People often say to me, when I speak to them on this podcast about parents that they've lost, that when we lose someone, it often changes our perspective on them and the situation, and often the issue that held us apart. When your mum came to you and told you that he had now passed away, is there anything you look back on and go, with that new perspective now that he's gone, and go, do you know what? This would have been probably a different or a better way of handling the situation. Is there any regrets there at all?
I can't really have regrets personally, because the circumstance I was in was not of my making.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was told by my grandma that, and my auntie as well, Auntie Mel, they both would tell me passionately how much my mum and dad loved each other. But there was also an element that they said it's a good job that he went away, because if he'd have not gone away, it's highly likely that my mum and me would have been dead, because he was apparently very abusive. And
to your mother?
Yeah.
Did you ever know this? Did you ever see this?
No, I wasn't really. I think it was more before I was born, and then, you know, I think, yeah, I was too young to really understand it. Like, my mum's told me about stuff more recently, and, you know, and as I've been, like, you know, uncovering things about myself, like, I've asked more questions.
What have you been trying to figure out about yourself?
A lot of things. The last few years, the point in my existence, ultimately.
If we go back to the rest of the context there, from those early years, what were you like socially in school, and did you like school?
I like learning. I like trying to understand things. But did I like school? I was scared of school.
Why?
Just because I used to get beat up all the time. Like, school for me was painful. But it wasn't the learning aspect of it. It was getting to and from the lessons, surviving the playground. Like, that for me was difficult because I went to a school that was predominantly, a more white school, so let's say, and I was getting to an age where my complexion started to show, so it was obvious that I wasn't full English. So it was a lot harder to hide because I was told when I lived on the estate, I was recommended by everybody, by my mum, by my nan, by just anybody who was close to my family at the time. If anybody asks, just say you're white. It was kind of ingrained in where we lived to hate anything that is different.
I read about a story where someone threw you into a river. Okay.
Oh yeah, the dam. Yeah, that's so one of the estates I lived on quite a few council estates in Bradford, depending on where my mum's boyfriends lived, or girlfriends at the time. So I remember there's Delphil Estate and then there's Woodside Estate, and separating them is a big massive field, and then in the middle of the field is a dam, and it was where like all the cool kids would kind of go to hang out, and I wasn't one of the cool kids, but like one time I got invited down there, so I thought, oh, amazing, finally being accepted. And when I got there, they only invited me down there to kind of throw me in the dam. They knew I couldn't swim. Like, I didn't have an adult to teach me how to swim. So I didn't learn to swim till I was like, 14, 15. So they threw me in the dam, and it was one of the most traumatizing experiences I'd felt at that time. Thankfully, there was one guy on the estate, Wayne Jowett, who basically dived in and helped me out, and he was a really good swimmer. He could get me to safety, and yeah, like stuff like that happened all the time. But it wasn't like, I can remember that because I couldn't swim, and if you've ever experienced that panic that you get when you feel like you're drowning, that'll stay with you. I don't like going, I don't like going into the sea and stuff like that, cause like getting into water in general is not my favourite thing.
You and me both. I can't swim either, so I remember the first time I nearly drowned, and I remember the person that jumped in and saved me when I was a kid as well. Remember it like it was yesterday. So
yeah, so like that experience happened, it happened on the way to school, it happened after school, so for me the thought of going to school was always like a daunting notion. There were certain teachers like Mrs. Wilcox, she was my English teacher, and she was really nice and she was really nurturing, and I didn't feel stupid in front of her, because in a lot of the classes, when the teachers are asking you to get involved, I was so nervous of other people's opinions in the class that if I spoke up, if I put my hand up to answer a question and it was wrong, then that just was going to lead to more getting beaten up harder after school, or more ridicule. So I kind of kept myself to myself, but at the same time I was just like this like sad loner kid who would take the long way home, so I didn't get beat up.
I remember speaking to Israel Adesanya, who was the UFC world champion, and him telling me a very similar story about taking the long way round school so that he would avoid the bullies on the playground and all of those things. Again, in his situation, it was heavily racially motivated. He was this kid that had flown to New Zealand from Africa. He was the black kid, and so he was he ultimately turns to fighting as a way to help him survive.
Yeah, I mean, he's very good at it.
Very good
I've
at
seen
it.
him. He's amazing.
Well, I think about your story and I go, in a way, did you turn to magic as a way to help you to survive?
Ultimately, that's where it ended up. But I didn't turn to magic. Magic kind of found me, because it was never something I was into initially. It was something that my grandpa used to do. He'd do tricks here and there, you know, little, like the sort of things you see a guy doing in a pub, you know, nothing like super amazing. But to me, he was like kind of the main male role model in my life. And he was always the life of the party, you know, and he seemed to have an answer to every single problem. And one day when he was picking me up from school, like, he saw the sort of things that was happening to me. And I never knew he saw this, but, you know, he'd always get to the school playground early, so, you know, so he didn't want to be late for picking me up. And often I'd walk out the door and straight away kind of get in a fight or get caught up in something. And he kind of stayed back and never really got involved, but he saw it kind of be quite bad one day. And when he was walking home, he's telling me he's going to like show me some things, you know, that might help me. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be like Karate Kid, you know, Mr. Miyagi, you know, like. But it wasn't any of that stuff. He showed me magic, and he says, you know, these things that they get me positive attention when I'm out and about, when I share these things. So maybe try these. And I was scared at school about trying them, because I'm like thinking, well, I'm already seen as this weirdo, this outcast. Like, how is now, you know, is sharing magic with people? Because magic wasn't like a cool thing. Thankfully, it made me stand out in a different way, and it deflected attention from me. And there was definitely some people that, you know, shunned it, didn't like it, but there was enough people that thought it was interesting and, you know, kind of cool, that it got people off my back. That was really where the magic began, properly. That's before that point. It was, you know, it was something that I was using to deflect attention from the other areas of my life that I was trying to hide.
It's quite remarkable how many times I've heard similar stories about someone finding a way to belong through a craft or through singing or through acting, whatever it might be, and then them committing their life to that. It's almost like they become addicted to it in some way. And I guess the issue is, when you ask yourself the question, what am I now without it? Do I therefore not belong if I don't do magic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
I'm sure we're going to come to that. At about 13 years old in 95, you're diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is very young, I believe, to be diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is a lifelong disease. It's like a severe inflammation related to irritable bowel syndrome, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And it can be life-threatening as well.
Yeah. I've had a few moments where I've had life-threatening operations.
How does that change the picture at 13 years old with that diagnosis, and what led up to that diagnosis?
Well, before the diagnosis, I'd got to, you know, my teenage years, where you kind of start to have changes, right? You're going through puberty, and I was definitely like a bit of a slow start. I was still, you know, all the kids at school were getting bigger, and I was getting smaller. Or I wasn't getting smaller, but they were getting bigger, and I just basically wasn't really kind of growing at the same rate. And my mum started to take me to the hospital to get tests done to try and figure out, you know, what was up with me, which I understand why my mum would do that, but at the same time, for a kid who feels like they don't belong, to then be taken to hospital to have tests done on me to figure out what's wrong with me, like, suddenly I'm like, well, alright, I don't belong and I've got something wrong with me. I mean, this is, you know, like, what is the point in me? You know, am I broken? Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, there clearly was issues, and they found that I had Crohn's disease, and I guess now I feel that's it's an incredibly good thing to have done. The problem was back then there wasn't enough known about Crohn's as there is now.
Right.
The doctors understand it a lot more. They understand how to treat it, and people are a lot more open to it. Essentially, it's an illness that affects your bowels, which ultimately affects, shit, and how your body digests things. And that's not the sort of topics that are that easy to talk about, especially when you're a teenager going through your formative years.
Is there a lot of pain associated with Crohn's disease?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stomach cramps. I mean, if I don't take my medication, I'm on at the moment, I can struggle to walk or to even get out of bed.
Really?
Yeah. It's like having a wound inside your tummy, and it's like an open wound, and every time you eat, it's like rubbing dirt into that open wound, so it's never going to heal. It's going to constantly keep getting infected, and it's going to constantly keep being inflamed. And because it's inside you, your gut affects every part of your body. So, and then it has side effects, which one of the side effects is reactive arthritis, which is what I suffer from, where if my Crohn's flares up, which can be brought on from simple things like just everyday stress, you don't have to just eat something for it to be bad. Like you can have a stressful day, and it can give you a stomach ache, which then can ultimately spread to the rest of your body and make you feel debilitated. And that, if you've got reactive arthritis, it means that all your joints start to seize up and ache. Hence why sometimes I struggle to walk and kind of function. And you kind of need your mobility to be a good magician. So for me, when that happens, it stops me from being able to perform the way that I've kind of grown to love.
And that will then have knock-on effects to the psychological.
Yeah, and every case of Crohn's is different. It affects people in different ways, but ultimately, yeah. Imagine having stomach ache just all the time, and being scared to eat because you don't want to, eat something, and it wipe you out for the rest of the day.
Right. So you go to this new sixth form college. You end up dropping out of college because you decide you want to pursue magic full time, and then you go off to America, where you stayed with your grandmother in America. By the age of sort of 17 years old, you have that operation for your Crohn's, which removes part of your stomach. And then at sort of 20 years old, you end up back in London. And that's when you started to sort of gain a following for your performances online. I think, most of us saw that chapter of your life, I believe, most of us, through videos on social media, stuff on TV, and all of that. And from there on, it really looks like your career starts to take off. Because I was looking through your biography, and at 22 years old, you receive an invitation to perform at the United States Super Bowl. By 29 years old, you have your own TV show called Dynamo Magician Impossible. And then that show's a smash hit, wins all these awards, Best Entertainment Program. Is that really, in your view, where things started to take off? You're 29 years old, 30 years old, everything you touch has turned into gold, and you become this kind of sensation.
I guess that depends on what you class as, what is success, right? Because for me, the beginning of success, where things started to take off, was when I got my Prince's Trust business startup loan.
You were what, when you were 16 or something? Or?
No, I was a bit older. It was 2002.
So 20?
Mm-hmm. Before that point, I thought one day I'm going to have to grow up, or one day I'm going to have to get
a real job.
Yeah.
People say, right?
Yeah, but I think right up until my grandpa died and my nana passed, I think they were still thinking that I might come home one day and say, oh, I've got a proper job now.
What was that?
My grandpa died in 2012, right? And he died in the middle of my second series of Magician Impossible. So he got to see some of his, like, the way he nurtured me and helped me, and shared that magic. He got to see some of that magic get brought to life on screen. So that's probably some of my proudest moments. But then my nana, sadly, she passed in the last couple of years. I don't think anybody really knows about my nana passing, outside of my family and my friends. And for me, like, my nana was my biggest supporter for everything, but I know that she was always worried about me, because she always thought that this magic thing wouldn't work out, and she wanted me to have something to fall back on. When I dropped out of college to pursue magic, as that's just all I wanted to do, she was very worried. She was the one trying to tell me that I should not fall out. I need to get an education, and in many respects, the advice she was giving was good advice. But luckily, things kind of turned out all right in the magic.
I mean, it turned out all right. It's quite an understatement. You were Magician of the Year multiple times. The TV show Magician Impossible then won the TV Choice Awards as Best Entertainment Show. You ended that Dynamo's Magician Impossible show after its 4th season, I believe. And then you embarked on your first live tour called Seeing is Believing. And then when you were 35 years old in 2017, you stopped that tour suddenly.
Yeah, I think the tour kind of ran its course. We did over, we did a lot of countries and a lot of tickets, and it was amazing. I like trying pushing the envelope with magic and with everything I do, and I felt like that time on the road gave me time to have a lot of new ideas, and I felt like I wanted to try and bring some of those ideas to life. But some of those ideas had to get put on hold, because it was shortly after that I got really sick with my Crohn's.
What happened?
Just got food poisoning, and that gave me a Campylobacter food poisoning, which basically is like probably the worst type of food poisoning you can get. And that, combined with my Crohn's, was a recipe for disaster. So basically, I was in hospital. I just remember it was like 10 o'clock. I was getting ready to go to bed, and I went to the bathroom, and I had this like horrible feeling in my stomach. But I've got Crohn's, so I'm used to kind of having to numb these feelings. I'm used to just thinking, oh, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable for like half an hour, but it'll pass, right? And it wasn't going away, and then suddenly, like, blood was coming out of my mouth. I was vomiting. Blood was coming out of both sides, right? And I didn't know what to do. It wouldn't stop. I was in so much pain. I was screaming my wife, and literally I got rushed to hospital, and they gave me all the medication to try, they put me on the drip and morphine and everything, and nothing was getting rid of the pain. I never felt a pain like it, and I just did not understand what it was like, and because of that, it caused my Crohn's to kind of, even though I had so much of my Crohn's cut out already in previous operations, it caused it to spread into a different part of my bowel, and from that came the reactive arthritis, because in the part of the bowel that it moved to had different side effects that I'd never had before.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just getting these sensations where I'd got kind of over the, a few months later, I'm over the food poisoning element of it. I'm out of hospital. I'm kind of, trying to get on with my life. But I'd be holding my cards. I'd be doing, magic, things that, stuff that I do in my sleep, right? But suddenly I was getting shooting pains in my joints, and it was like electric shocks. I couldn't hold the cards anymore. I was struggling to move. I'd be in the seat and I wouldn't be able to get up because my knees would be like stuck. and I'd never had that experience before, and I suddenly felt like Mr. Burns, you know, from The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he seems really like frail and weak, and I felt like I was, you know, I wasn't old. I felt like I should be in my prime. You know what I mean? And I couldn't understand it. I felt like my body was deteriorating around me, and so I went basically on medical trials for the next few years. And the thing is with medical trials is that when you try a new medicine, you have to try it for 3 months before the doctors will write that off as not working and try on a new medication. But there was times when I knew within the first 2 weeks it wasn't working, but I had to go the full 3 months, and in those 3 months, you know, my symptoms weren't getting better. If anything, they'd get worse. And it wasn't until we got to the 9th month where I started this medication called infliximab, where you have to go to the hospital every few weeks and you get put on a drip and you stay there for like 8 hours, and they basically put this medicine inside you, and that really had an incredible effect. Like, that gave me a new lease of life. I felt stronger. I probably felt stronger than I'd felt before I was on it. But then COVID happened. It stopped my infliximab from working. So suddenly, I'm in 2020 and I'm on medical trials again. And I tried, I tried so many different medications. It wasn't until like the beginning of 2021 where I really got one that was really working properly. And even now I'm on that, but I still have, like, I have 3 days a week where I'm really bad, where my joints just don't really work that well, and my Crohn's, my stomach feels bad. But yeah, that was a big part of the reason why I kind of, I guess, disappeared for a while.
But it's not the only reason why you disappeared for a while.
Yeah, I think everything that my body was going through, everything that I was going through, the pressures of, you know, trying, you know, like wanting to do magic, and the pressures of trying to sustain a career and live up to people's expectations, was almost an impossible task to do whilst I was trying to fix my body. And ultimately, you know, I ended up in a situation where, without magic, without being able to do what I loved, not knowing if I was ever going to be able to get it back, made me think, what's the point in my existence? And I think my body was kind of imploding, and so was my mind.
What was going on in your mind?
I didn't know what to do with my life. Didn't know what to do with myself. There's a lot of things that I don't want to fully go into, so but I'll try and, you know, give you as much as I can. There was just so much noise in my head, and I hated myself for feeling how I felt. I hated the way my body felt because of everything I was dealing with. If I saw myself in a mirror in my house, I hated what was looking back at me. I hated it so much that I'd slam my head into the mirror and just keep slamming it to try and just either, you know, make it go away. And yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to be alive because I didn't feel like the life I had. Take away all the success and, you know, that side of things. I wasn't living because I wasn't able to do the thing I loved the most, which was magic. And it was a time in my life where I felt that magic couldn't fix me. But magic's always been the thing that has given me hope, that I've kind of used to overcome the bullying, overcome the self-doubt and the lack of belief from others and in my own self. And suddenly I'm in a position where I don't know what to do with myself, and magic isn't going to fix it. And I can't, until I'm fixed, I can't do the thing that gives me a reason, gives me a purpose in performing magic. I can't do that because I'm not mentally or physically capable.
How long did that last?
I'm still dealing with it now, to be honest. Like, it's difficult because I'm a magician, right? And to everybody else looking at me as a magician, I'm someone who does the impossible. I'm someone who kind of should be able to do anything. But I'm a magician who felt like, you know, back then, and, you know, and still at times now, I'm a magician who feels like I can't do the first thing that a magician needs to do, perform magic. So then I'm just an imposter. I can't live up to the expectations that people have of me. And it's not that I'm not the sort of person who like searches for validation from other people, you know, like, I mean, you know, magic is not an art form that is seen as the coolest thing ever. Do you know what I mean? You know, I'd have set myself up to fail if you know, by following through with magic, if I'd have been naive to that point. Do you know what I mean? I know that magic's never been cool, right? And, you know, I hope that in some small way I've helped to make it feel a bit cooler than maybe what it was perceived as. But magic's the only thing that I'm good at. And I think the way that I can manipulate my body and, you know, kind of handle cards and do the things is a big part of what's made my magic unique and feel special. And not being able to do that kills me.
Am I right in thinking that at that same time your grandmother had passed away, who was your biggest supporter, your body was breaking down because of Crohn's and your illness around that time as well, and I'd also heard that you had had a legal dispute with your management, which meant that you could no longer use your social media channels, the name Dynamo, etc., etc., and that had all happened in this concentrated period of your life?
There was a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, like, you know, I think losing my nana ultimately was, I think, the thing that, I guess, the straw that brought the camel's back is the expression that you use, because she's always been the backbone for me. Whenever I felt weak, and there's been a lot of times I felt weak, my nana's always been strong for me. And then with a lot of things going on in my life, with my life being flipped upside down, you know, and then my nana going as well, it was just like, man, like, you know, it just felt like the world was out to get me, and I kind of wanted the ground to just break open and just swallow me up.
If I was a fly on the wall in your house at that time, what would I have seen?
A lot of stuff that I don't really want. I wouldn't want anybody to see. Like, I wasn't very nice to myself. There's a lot of pain. also a lot of numbness, and I felt that, ironically actually, I didn't feel like, I felt so numb that I'd hurt myself to try and feel something.
Self-harming.
Mm-hmm.
Does your partner know what's going on in your life, inside your head, during this period? Because I have a partner, and if I was in such a dark place where I was self-harming and doing some of the things you've described, that banging my head against a mirror, and I was in that sort of cycle of self-hatred, my partner, I think my partner would know.
Yeah. She knew. She maybe didn't know the extent of it to begin with, and I think also the loss side of things, you know, she obviously felt that herself. So I think those things, she's dealing with her own grief at the same time. So sometimes when you're dealing with grief, it's hard to see outside of your own grief to see other people's. You know what I mean? And we were kind of almost together in those moments. You know, we came together, like, you know, but she was the one who ultimately got me to go to therapy and to get the help and support that I needed, really.
In this chapter, was there a moment you look back on and say that was my rock bottom?
Yeah, 6th of November 2020.
The 6th of November 2020. Almost 3 years ago today. Exactly, almost. Why was that the hardest day?
Because that was the day that I knew that she knew. Because she found me, and I tried to kill myself.
She found you in the house? She found you unconscious?
Yep, in the dog bed.
What are you comfortable talking about?
I mean, I'm not super comfortable at life generally, so, you know, just talking. This is the first time I've kind of done an interview that's not been with a therapist since 2020. So, you know, I trust you. You've been a help for me over the last few years. So I guess if you're respectful, then I respect what you'll do with what I say will be done.
There's two things. I want you to feel comfortable about whatever you say, but also after this conversation, if there's anything you're not comfortable with having said, you can of course let me know, and it won't be out there in the world. But I want to I think the question that that I think is of most value is understanding how someone gets to that point. I've actually spent quite a long time speaking to Simon Gunning, who's the CEO of CALM, Campaign Against Living Miserably.
Yeah.
And he's done a really great job of helping me to understand suicidality as a topic, but also when I have a public platform like this where I speak on these subject matters occasionally, about what elements of that are useful for people that are in that mindset now. And what he's shared with me is part of it is people understanding that how someone gets there, but also understanding how they go from there and they rise out of that situation. What was on your mind when that led you up to that moment?
I felt that I had so many problems that I couldn't figure out how to even solve one of them. And the problems weren't just affecting me, they were affecting my household, they were affecting, just my family's life. And a big part of me thought, if I'm dead, then my problems won't affect these other people in my life, and they will be alright. Because I felt like, ultimately, I was the problem. It was quite a simple kind of, that was it. It was like, okay, if I'm not here, then everybody else might be happier and they can get on with their lives, and that was it.
Your wife finds you that day in the dog bed, and then she calls an ambulance.
But she called Edward Despot, who was my doctor. He's my gastroenterologist, my Crohn specialist. And then I remember, she was on the phone to him when I kind of came round, and she was just crying. And that's where you asked me a moment where it feels like it was the worst. I'd probably hurt myself worse on previous occasions, but I'd never been found by the one person in this life whose opinion I genuinely care about. And no matter what I do now, in the future, there's nothing I can do that can erase what she saw. And that's the thing I'm the most ashamed of, because in the moment I felt like I was trying to maybe do something that would take all the problems I thought I was facing and remove them from everybody else's world. But I'd not actually thought about what these people would feel if I wasn't here. Do you know what I mean? So that's the shame that I feel for that. I don't feel ashamed for feeling the way I did, but I feel ashamed that my wife kind of saw that. Like, it's just embarrassing, isn't it? She's the person I'm supposed to be strong for. She's the person who relies on me. I'm the husband. I don't mean that. Like, I know we live in a modern world, where you don't. But I'm supposed to be there to be strong for her, and I couldn't even be strong for myself.
Can I ask you a question? In that, when someone is in that situation as you were psychologically, what do you think those around them can do to support that person? Or do you think there's very little those around? I'm trying to really understand how to support someone, in my life that would be in such a mindset.
I mean, I guess what my wife did, not just call you. Naturally, you would call someone for help, like a doctor or something like that. But I mean, even though I still feel it, and I can't necessarily speak on her behalf, but she didn't make me feel ashamed.
She loves you, doesn't she?
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest gifts, isn't it, to have someone in your life like that just loves you through thick and thin.
from the experience and how she's been, even up till now, you know, how she dealt with it and dealt with me, and I think it's the first time outside of my nana, outside of family who, you know, they have to do it, it's unconditional, right? Because they're family, they're blood. But it's the first time that I have actually felt the love of somebody else. Like, because we've been married a long time before then, but you know, you just never know what someone's gonna act like when shit really hits the fan.
And they see you naked.
Yeah. And I was exposed. You can't get any more exposed than from what I felt. And she became the rock. She gave me a love that I've never had to deal with it. And you know, that is something that I didn't necessarily maybe know I needed in my life until that moment, and that ultimately has kept me alive.
Around this time, there's a dispute with your management. What are you able to tell me about that? Because I know it's a legal dispute, so there's things that probably can't talk about, but I think it's important context to understand what you're going through in this moment as it relates to your sense of purpose and identity and all those things. What are you able to tell me?
I think I was at a time in my life where I felt lost, and I knew if I, you know, stayed doing things exactly the same way that I'd always done them, then you're only going to get kind of the same results, right? You know, if I'm feeling suicidal thoughts and I'm feeling kind of like worthless, then the only way to break that cycle is to have a fresh start. Just needed to break away from everything, and ultimately, you know, you've started many businesses, and you know, I'm sure some of those have failed and some of those have, you know, you've had to have, you know, go your separate ways at times. So that happens in business, and I think there was a lot of work needed to be done on myself, and which had to take time away from that. Like, I can't really touch on it too much. I'm trying to be extremely careful what I say.
It's all good. I'm actually quite interested in the not what happened, but the consequence of what happened. So, because I've noticed you've not been posting on social media in a while, for example. So I assumed that one of the consequences of this separation with your management was you've not been able to use your social media accounts, and we've not seen you on the internet as much. Is that a correct assumption?
I don't feel like I've wanted to kind of post things because I felt like my life hasn't been worth sharing. So, you know, whilst I've been trying to fix myself, I didn't feel comfortable kind of sharing in those moments, and kind of just let the lawyers do what they do and figure that stuff out, because I'm too busy trying to figure out what's going on in my own head, you know, how to kind of just get to a place in this world where I can deal with the pressure of life. Ultimately, all I wanted to do, which is, you know, what's led me to here with you today, is get to a place in my life where I could share magic again. And even if my arthritis and my Crohn's stopped me doing it in the way I used to, I had to find a new way to share it. And there's certain things in the past that I've had to go through, negative experiences, you know, positive experiences, but ultimately I've had to go through those things to learn and grow from them, and some things I've had to leave behind. And I'm
Speaking of things you've left behind, are you still Dynamo?
part of me is always Dynamo, yeah, of course, like, but the thing is, I've battled with knowing who. They almost like has been a battle between me and myself, because the lines are so blurred, or were so blurred, between, you know, the Stephen that you know, and the Dynamo that, you know, the greater world kind of knows. So then, like, it's been a lot of confusion, right? In simple terms, it's been a lot of confusion, because Dynamo is the part of me that feels like it can do anything. But Stephen's the flawed human being that realises and knows that he can't. And it's a conflict. And then when my body's falling apart, my life's falling apart, I'm losing everything in my life outside of magic that I love, then I'm just an empty shell. And that's the sort of feeling that makes you think, like, what is the point? Why am I here? Like, I am worthless to this world